Ethiopia has been subject to year-long misinformation and disinformation by global media and some other actors. And this misinformation and disinformation has now got a shape of consortium of actors like the US government and US officials, as well as some TPLF people in international organizations, lobbyist groups based in USA, and the TPLF diaspora. And this has got criticism by Ethiopians as well as Africans. Many Africans believe that this is the second scramble for Africa, which has already started in Ethiopia. And this edition of Addis Dialogue will bring insights into these matters. And my guest today is Dr.Anteneh Tsegaye from Addis Ababa University. Thank you for staying with us. And I'm Santayo Tamrat with this edition. Thank you, Dr. Anteneh Tsegaye from Addis Ababa University, for joining Addis Dialogue.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's start just discussing today's Addis Dialogue with the recent measure of Ethiopian government against certain Western media houses. It has issued warning for 4 media houses, including CNN and the BBC. In what grounds is the government rational, and is that timely decision?
Yes, I think that's rational and timely, and in the sense that the misrepresentation of this country is a long story, and misinforming unintentionally and with some grounds, Ethiopia has been imaged differently from the reality. But this has taken a long time, and during the TPLF and even after that. So this long story has established strong ground to dismantle this country. So giving a different image, misinforming and disinforming the world has become a story and an end. So these media houses should be told that they are misrepresenting, misinforming and disinforming the country. So I think this is a good initiative because they should be told.
Okay. Do you think that the recent measure by the Ethiopian government against this media, that means the issuance of the warning, is that timely?
Yeah, for me it's rather a little delayed. Maybe because the government has been trying to take, positive measures or trying some other way. But now it is time, in a sense, that we should act, because we are in a turning point in the history of the country. So the media has power. Therefore, these media houses should be told and should act according to the law of the country, and at the same time to the media ethics that we all are familiar with, because they are doing that intentionally. There are a number of stories that can better explain every episode, every fake news they made, and every measures they have taken to dismantle this country. So I think even though it is late, and at least now it is time to give them written warnings. So I think that's right, to protect this country.
Okay, so it's almost a year since the Ethiopian authorities and the public started criticizing Western media for their clear bias to TPLF. And what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's right. As people, as government, Ethiopians, we tried hard to take, to be patient and to think about how these people may, come to their consciousness. But since last year, and the people are voicing, and I think you have seen recently in 27 countries in the world, the Ethiopian diaspora is trying to go against all this misrepresentation of the country and fighting the junta group through the media. So in and out of the country, people are familiar with what's happening. So everybody is in fight against this terrorist group and their associates.
Well, so from journalistic principles and ethics, as well as International media law. What would you say on a wave of biased reports on Ethiopia by CNN, the BBC, or others, just including the genocide on Tigrayanis, the systemic starvation of Tigrayanis, mass killings, and some other issues like this, which have been just reported for a long time now?
Yeah, that's funny for me, brother, because someone who talks about media freedom, someone who talks about, the ethics, the law of media, teaching the world about media ethics, media law, they are fabricating fake news. That is a surprise for most people. And at the same time, it's funny. We don't expect from BBC, CNN, to broadcast a fake story, a cooked up story. But that has been a tradition these days. So I think ethics and law is dependent on various factors. But what is funny and what is interesting is those teaching the world, and they taking themselves as the only yardstick to teach, to measure freedom of press, democracy, they are going against their own words. So there are a number of examples that we can bring into this discussion. So it is funny that they are teaching the world about freedom, the West dictating the rest of the world about democracy and about freedom and about ethics. But they are responsible for most of the distractions that we have experienced in this country because of the fake news and how they are siding with one junta group. So, well, whenever they come to this country, they have different, ways to approach Ethiopia through, let's say, teaching the people or giving aids or this and that. And we learned from this that there is no freedom, there is no free lunch. So they may approach us in different ways, and unless we are very responsible and watchful about what they do, they are always involved in their own intentions. Okay. So the law may not work for them.
Well, what do you think are the major rationale behind the misinformation and disinformation on the conflict in North Ethiopia by the global media?
I think we need to see the global media in two ways. Sometimes we have some problems of generalizing the whole. So I think we have to give time to the world media to know us. I sometimes feel that they don't know us. They take the experience of another country and they want to experience it into a different country. And at the same time, we didn't sell ourselves. We didn't inform them very well about who we are in their own language, in the language that they can understand. We know that there are a number of scholars who studied Ethiopia, but all what they studied is only on the shelf. And they didn't communicate who we are to their own community or to their own world. That's simply for academic exercises. So the problem that we have now is how the images and they disinform and misinform intentionally and perhaps not intentionally because of simply associating themselves with a certain group. So the definition that they have about Ethiopia depends largely upon the teaching or the pedagogy of TPLF. TPLF has been with them for the last 40 years, being a junta, a leader, and at the same time a freedom fighter in the last 3 eras. So most of the Western media or the Western media associated with TPLF have a different definition about this country. We know that TPLF often breaks and makes the story of this country and the brand of the country. The time that EPRDF became the governor or the leader of this country, they redefined the country. And they gave a different definition about this country, a different brand. That is the brand often communicated to the Western media or the allies of the TPLF. So They've been together for the last 40 years. So it's not a surprise if they have the same definition for this country. And the TPLF has often, you know, a bad or a wrong or twisted definition of this country. So by default, they have a common definition. So that means a common interest. That means, you know, it goes beyond that.
As some Ethiopians say, it appears that there has come a consortium of these media houses and U.S. officials like Susan Rice, U.S.-based lobbyist groups, and some UN officials, the TPLF people in international organizations in the diaspora. Then this consortium is aimed at dehumanizing Ethiopians and destabilizing the country through such narratives as ethnic cleansing, genocide, systemic starvation, and so on. Then what's your reaction to this?
And the first question is, why all eyes on this country? Why all eyes on Ethiopia? You see, it's because they had a long history of relationship. That means there is a common interest. It is not about the whole Western country in the first place. It's not about the whole America having a different picture to Ethiopia. Only the politicians who have affiliations with the rulers or the ex-leadership of Ethiopia, that's TPLF. Added to that, the media and those individuals in the, you know, in the UN or elsewhere who have association with the TPLF are taking the, you know, the voice, the big voice in defining and redefining and dictating the direction, the future direction of this country. So they are doing this because TPLF is no more leading the country, and they want TPLF to come back so that they can dictate their own agendas easily. If TPLF is not there on the leadership position, then their second choice is to have a leader of Ethiopia who can listen to them and whom they can dictate. And now they don't have this. Then the third option that they have is to dismantle this country. Why? Well, do they really need to dismantle this country, and for what purpose? You may ask yourself a question like that. It is because in an early stage, if the leader is against them, that leader should be, you know, stopped in one way or the other, and one mechanism is to helping those fighting in the jungle, and plus dismantling the country and trying to have a, you know, transitional government of their own, and denying for the first time a legitimate leadership elected by democratic way. The first time this country, it's really a surprise for me in a sense that why don't the United States of America, for example, doesn't accredit or give legitimacy to a government elected by the people and fighting a terrorist group? And at the same time, why are they behind the terrorist group? So that means for me, just to summarize this point, they need a leadership in Addis Ababa that they can dictate, that they can import their own way, their own political ideology, their own interests, their own whatever in this country. But what is interesting here is if they lose this, they may lose the rest of Africa. Particularly, there's the Horn of Africa. So the fight and the war is not only about Ethiopia, it's all about Africa as well.
Sure.
So all the other African countries, I think they are waiting for what's going on. The first time, as you remember, they told us not to build the dam to fill the water. We did it. That's the first failure of their own. The second is they dictated us not to conduct election. We did it. That's their second failure. And now the third is this time. This time they may try to, they are doing, you know, the media war. This is the media war episode of the real war. if you take lesson from how they entered to other countries, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in other countries, the first thing they usually do is the media war. And they tend to, you know, care for the people there. But finally, they, you know, get involved into the military war. The military, they may, you know. So as Ethiopians, we need to know, and also Africans should understand and should be, you know, very conscious about what's going on. The African Union is here. And all the African brothers, they should know that Ethiopia is fighting their war. If the United States and the countries of this consortium fail, I think that may cost us a lot, but we can see the other side of, you know, our future. Yeah.
So for what you said, that why is the US behind the terrorist group? There have been just a number of cases that the United States has been supporting different global terrorist groups like the ISIS and also the Al-Qaeda. For example, before September 11 attack, it was just the US that was supporting Al-Qaeda. It was the US that trained Bin Laden. And also it was the US, as Donald Trump said officially during his election campaign, it was just the Obama administration that established the ISIS. So supporting the TPLF now is no more different history.
Exactly. This is the history of the United States. If you take the Afghanistan case, the Bin Laden issues as well, where, if you ask where these groups were taught, where did they take all these military trainings? In one way or the other, there is the United States. Every time, in every war scenario. And sometimes you see them on the left side of that part, and sometimes on the other side as well. So they may shift also. So they don't have a stable position, but a stable interest. So behind every war, if you ask seriously, that is the United States. So we should be careful of the trend of all the countries that were wrongly affected by the intervention of the United States. And at the same time, we should be also careful at, you know, how we are to win a war in the Ethiopian way. And we should not be dictated by any of the other world. Well, we can seek assistance, but I think we have our own way of, you know, fighting them. And I think in this era of media, and the media has to be one of the battlegrounds in informing the right image, the right brand of this country in their own language or in the language that they can understand. So ETV, like for example, in the English program or all the other foreign programs, they should be very strong soldiers of the media in telling the world who we are. And I think that's very helpful for the majority of the people who blindly sided, you know, TPLF or the other. So it is always good to inform the world. If you don't inform, you know, the people take what is already informed.
Sure.
So it's all about, you know, the fighting, and the fighting is not only in the fields, but also through the media, by informing the, you know, the Ethiopian people this time. I think they are all familiar with, and they know what is going on. But the problem is we need to teach the world about who we are, giving them the right picture, other than the picture given to them by TPLF for the last 40 years.
Okay. Well, that's a good point. So how do you describe the potential of such a global media campaign with a goal of disinformation and misinformation against Ethiopia in undermining the country's sovereignty, reputation, and good image?
Yeah, that's dangerous. We don't need to take that simple. some people argue that, especially Ethiopians, they say that, okay, we don't care about whatever they talk. No, we need to care about what they talk. Because in the content of the talk, we need to tell that is wrong. Because the people, the majority of the Western countries, they believe in reading and they believe in getting information from the right source or from different sources that they can make their own decision. But if we fail not to inform them, tell them in their own language, updating timely, then the devastation rate may decline. And at the same time, the people may ask their government, why are you capitalizing on Ethiopia? Why are you, citing the TPLF in the first place? So they have governments of their own. So we need to air who we are and what's happening in this country as a result of those countries to those people, and the people would ask. So we need to tell the people of the world, this is what we are. We have never get involved in capturing other countries, or we are known for fighting for the right of the country, and we are not doing anything evil to people, but we are simply responding. So that should be communicated to everybody in the Western world, so that the people may ask their government, why are you doing this? Why are you involved in a fight in Ethiopia? The first thing, this is the beginning of the story. They are, through the media, they are misinforming, they are disinforming. And that's the second step. And then finally, they may approach to military intervention. So for that, the government of every of the countries asks the people, the taxpayers. So these taxpayers should say no if they are informed by our media. But if we are not informing them, they simply accept the one side of the story. So I think this is not something simple. Whether they accept it or not, we are supposed to inform the world who we are, what is true, what's right, and what's happening with clear and balanced way, in a way that favors this country. Let me just say, the better way that can explain this is the phase negotiation theory. Mm-hmm. You see, a country has three phases, like every individual. Phase, I mean the identity. It's the identity you want other people to know. That's, let's say, what is Ethiopia and who is Ethiopia in a very favorable way, and what other people give it to you, to Ethiopia. Ethiopia is like this, like that. And the third is the real face of Ethiopia. So we need these three phases to come together. There must be a common point. If one is over-dominating the other one, so that becomes a fake face. Like if the others defining Ethiopia like the Western countries,
sure,
they are defining Ethiopia this way. They are misinforming, they are disinforming. So unless the favorable face that you want to portray, so unless we are doing that, we lose the war. We lose the identity. Like, for example, the Western countries, when they conceptualize Ethiopia, or if they are, they define as famine, war, drought.
Sure.
That's what they know. And for us, it's a different story. And our story should be communicated to those people who are defining us, or at least there must be a middle way. So the phase negotiation theory can explain this in a sense. We need to negotiate. Negotiation means, this is Ethiopia, the phase that we want Ethiopia to be portrayed, and the other phase, the phase that they give the genocidal country, the ethnic cleansing, and this and that.
Yeah, the TPLF together with some media and some Western governments.
Exactly. Yeah. So we should fight through the media, and we need to show who is doing the genocide, and why are they not, explaining or condemning the Makadra or the other genocides, or the ethnic cleansing. But it is only when the government did something that they want to capitalize that. So it is because of the intention that they have behind. So as a country and as individuals as well, you see, this is a time of the public diplomacy. So the diaspora for the last 5, 6 days, I think you are very familiar with, people are voicing, the diaspora is talking in every Western country, about into 27 countries yesterday, I guess. Okay. So every Ethiopian protesting the position the media has, the bad image, and their own governments, the governments in the United States and elsewhere. So the Ethiopian diaspora is doing a great job. So our media, the problem is we have very polarized media in this country. But in this domain, I think that's the fate of every of these media. So they should work together because they are working for us, this country, even though there are differences. So the medias, whether it is entertainment or news or whatever, they should work together to fight the image given to us, the wrong characterizations, the misinforming and the disinforming. So we need to work together. And the ambassadors in the foreign countries, the ambassador that we have should not live simply on the fenced, war compound. They should go out and inform every day, every time about this country. So without these, if we keep quiet, and then the image that we don't want, the unpleasant picture, may win the reality.
So working aggressively with the media, just creating some sort of media diplomacy, media relation, and some public diplomacy, whether it is in African countries or just other countries, to give the right image of how Ethiopia is currently, would be of great importance nowadays.
Sure, yes.
Okay, so it is almost reactive.
Exactly, that's a reactive approach. At least we are not late that much.
Okay.
It should have been a proactive, you see. We should have thought of this kind of approach earlier. In our history, we are very reactive in most of our crisis communication. So the problem is we don't forecast that much. But this can be forecasted. Think about 45 years of relationship between, TPLF and the Wayane, with the United States. Do you think that will immediately or all of a sudden will collapse? No. That's a very old brotherhood.
Sure.
So we should have expected this would happen. But we didn't expect it would be that much strong. To the extent that yesterday I heard that the US aid is planning to leave the country unless, they have their own dictation. They list, if you do this, we do that. So I think they are packing. So if they are packing, we say goodbye. Yeah, no. So I think we need to think about working individually as a citizen diplomacy, and as a group of public diplomats, especially the diaspora is doing their job. So locally as well, I think as institutions should also react, get involved, like School of Journalism and Communication. Or maybe the Ethiopian, those working on the Ethiopian image should be involved and should work with the media to promote a healthy and pleasant picture about this country and about the activities happening. And also the ambassadors that we have elsewhere, they should be involved. They should need to have a very smooth relationship with the diaspora, because I am very much familiar with, the tension between the ambassadors that we have and the diaspora community. So unless the ambassadors that we have in a foreign country, in a host country, and the diaspora together work, then the people in that country may have a better image of this country. So if they have a better image, I think misinforming and disinforming can be easily understood by the people of the foreign countries.
Finally, you have just mentioned almost the ways out, particularly toward this the global media campaign against Ethiopia. But what specific role should the government take in this regard?
Yeah, the government must, be responsible in mobilizing the media campaign and the public diplomacy. That means the government has to encourage and communicate with the embassies everywhere in the country globally and approach its diaspora, despite the differences that we have. The problem of the diaspora that we have in this country is we have a divided diaspora.
Sure.
And the same is true within the country, and the same is true with the media. But for this, we should work together irrespective of the differences. So the ambassadors should involve, the ambassadors in the foreign countries, the Ethiopian ambassadors, they should involve diaspora, having differences, whatever, and then they should work together to inform, and to picture, to image, and the complaints that we have, for example, to the parliament, to take the complaints that we have about what the government's doing in that government, let's say the United States, then people should campaign in front of the parliament. And locally, the government, has to inform the people timely. And delayed information about the war, for example, harms the society, the community in many ways. Because TPLF, the junta group, is the propagandist group. Sure. So they often make use of disinforming and misinforming as weapons of mass distraction. It's just like that. That's how they distract the public. So the government, I think, there has been, changes in informing every 2 days or 3 days. I think we get information from the Minister of Communication and also from the military. So that should be appropriate. Then the citizen within the country has to take themselves as soldiers of their own vicinity, And all the military sources should be within one center. And the information, again, should be from one center. But I think that's like a pool of information, and that should be communicated to the public regularly.
Well, so going to the issues that you mentioned about there was a demonstration in some 27 European Western countries. So Ethiopians and Ethiopian origins as well as some Eritreans are currently staging a huge wave of almost an unprecedented sort of protest rallies against the global media campaign on Ethiopia and the US intervention on Ethiopia's domestic affairs. So what messages can these leave to the global community and power systems like the United Nations, the NATO, and so on?
I think in one or the other way I try to explain this. So this is about public diplomacy and citizenship diplomacy. They are responsible for the fight, and they are responsible for what has been communicated. That means the fake news, and as well as how the media houses are misinforming and mischaracterizing this country. So in more than 27 countries, Ethiopians with, the Americans with Ethiopian origin, and the Eritreans, Americans with Eritrean origins, and there are also other Africans involved. That is a success. This is the war of Africa. You see, the Africans, they know. And when you think of the Africa, all Africans are brothers, and think of Eritreans with even blood attachment with this country. So that's right, that, individuals from the Eastern Africa, including the Horn of Africa, like Eritrea, are involved. And I think in the course of time, I'm sure others will follow this as well. And that is a good way. That's how, as citizens, we should work. And like I said before, the diaspora is working hard, day and night, to, protest. To protest, I think, no more. That's I think that's the key word in the, I don't know how to say, but it's a key word in the agenda of fighting this misrepresentation and the attempt for military intervention. And it's a neo colonization kind of approach, dictating the other country. So, well, I think they are doing this job, and the government should appreciate it and should also give credit, even though that's their own citizen responsibility for being Ethiopian. But I think the government has to encourage this, and similar protests should go further in terms of informing the world about the future of this country.
Well, you have just mentioned that Ethiopia is currently facing or fighting an African war.
Yeah.
And it has been just in recent days, many Africans said Ethiopia is fighting a proxy colonialism.
Exactly. That's a good phrase, yeah.
Yeah. It defended colonialism, and it almost averted here colonialism. And the first scramble for Africa ended in Ethiopia and spread to Africa, the rest of Africa and the world as well.
Yeah.
And nowadays, African brothers are saying that we must help Ethiopia to stop the second scramble for Africa. How do you react on this?
Yes. You know about the Adwa and the Italian case. Well, in those times, there was no means of media communication among brother Africans, but there is element of being, Pan-Africanism in every African heart, wherever you go. So the Ethiopia defeated the Italians during those wars that's against colonialism, and it was a country that experienced the first attempt to be colonized, and then was the mother of the African Union, was one of the fathers, and at the same time helping other African countries to fight for freedom. And the same is true today in the civilized world, where we have media, we get connected from everywhere, from north, south, east, west Africa to the center. So they are all African brothers and sisters, they are following. So that's why I said we need to, we need to communicate with them, and they should listen the right picture of Africa to make any decision. So the ETV, for example, the EPC, or any other media should inform the African brothers and sisters the right picture. It's timely, and keep connected so that we answer their questions. We involve them in the language that they speak. So you see, it is only when you communicate yourself that whether it is a friend or an enemy, communicate with both of them, then they can get a better picture about you. So this neo-colonizing, I think one of the elements for the fight is the media. Like I said before, we must inform the African brothers and sisters, and I think they should get involved in the normal movement, and they should, I think all of them are interested to know, but there is a scarcity of information from the Ethiopian part. Honestly speaking, the Ethiopian media is not addressing direct audience. The direct audience is the African brothers and sisters, and at the same time, whoever enemy that we have anywhere. But even the enemy, when they get the information, I think that splits in one way or the other, normally speaking. But so I think it's quite good to address and know our target group. And like Africans, we need to speak in the African way to them, to the brother way or to the sister way. And when we are communicating with the West, for example, again, we should give them in the way they understand. So, so in short, we are fighting the African war. This is not the first time. This is perhaps the second time during this century, I mean, in 21st century, and the war should look like the century as well. We will have to make use of the media, and with the media, in a sense, both the social and the mainstream media. So I think it's nice if we communicate, then we have clear brothers and clear enemies. That's quite good.
Good. So this is just a spirit of Pan-Africanism, clearly, and it started almost after a century and a half since colonialism was defeated.
Yeah.
And the root was, as I said, in Ethiopia. And how can this Pan-African movement be strengthened so that it will prevail all over Africa to stop the second scramble for Africa?
Yeah, you see, I don't know why most of the African countries, they, prefer to communicate with their old colonizers, the Francophone, the Anglophones. And the West also did their own way to prepare for this new colonization. So we don't have the African network. Every Ethiopian, for example, if you ask Ethiopians, where is Ghana? Where is Senegal? They will not answer. They rather answer where the United States is located. Because in the children's book, from grade 1 to 8, I was one of those group who wrote that book. So it was sponsored by the U.S. aid. And the back page, the back page of the cover page is, this book is from the people of America, because that's the sponsor of the textbook. So the kids learn more about the United States than Africa, the kids that we have here. The same is true. We don't have the African network, a very strong African network, African to African. So I think the African Union has to work hard on connecting Africans together economically. And we don't have, even a trade, a very strong trade among neighbors in Africa. How far do we know about Sudan? How far do we know about Kenya? Being Ethiopians, we as Ethiopians, and these two countries as neighbors. So there is no trade link, very trade, transports, media, all the ways, all the networks that connects Africa together on the ground. We need to have that kind of network on the ground so that Africa can be united and Africa can be listened. You can't be listened being, being apart from one another. So the first thing is, the Pan-Africanism is not only for this situation, but for the future as well. So we need to have a clear network among Africans in information and, communication, like transport, trade, commerce, so that helps all Africans to be together and to have a common goal, a common ground, and a better image at last.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anteneh, for the wonderful explanations on the issue. You are watching Addis Dialogue, and this is the conversation with Dr. Anteneh Tsegaye from Addis Ababa University School of Journalism. He shared us his views on why the disinformation and misinformation by a consortium of some global media and also Western governments on Ethiopia regarding the current state of affairs. And he also just shared us his views on the Pan-African movement that started against the new scramble for Africa. Thank you for joining us.